It was 2 a.m. when the silence of a quiet neighborhood shattered. A door splintered open, flashlights sliced through the darkness, and armed officers stormed inside. Their target? A black woman who had done nothing wrong. In those first terrifying seconds, she had no idea why her home was invaded, or if she would survive the night. But as the officers searched her walls, something caught their eyes, something that made them freeze in their tracks. What they discovered didn't just change the room. It exposed a truth far bigger than her. Her name was Angela Carter, a 34-year-old black woman who lived alone in a modest two-bedroom home on the east side of town. By day, she worked long hours as a forensic analyst, a career she had built on discipline, education, and a quiet determination to prove herself in a world that often doubted her. Neighbors knew her as polite, private, and steady, the kind of person who kept her porch light on for safety and double-checked her locks before bed. But that night, as she drifted into the deepest sleep, she was unaware that forces outside her control were moving closer. Somewhere in the dark, a decision was being made about her house, her life, and her worth. And though she couldn't hear it yet, the sound of heavy boots and splintering wood was already on its way. The night exploded in chaos. The crash of her front door being kicked open jolted Angela upright, her heart slamming against her chest. She barely had time to register what was happening before blinding beams of flashlights pierced through the darkness of her bedroom. Heavy boots pounded across the hardwood floors, the shouts of officers cutting through the silence with an authority that brooked no hesitation. She stumbled from her bed, confused, terrified, clutching her chest as questions swirled. Was this a break-in? A robbery? But no, the uniforms told her otherwise. This was the police, yet nothing about their entrance felt lawful. Their guns were drawn, their orders barked like she was already guilty of something. Angela had lived her entire life by the rules. She paid her bills on time, kept her home immaculate, worked long hours in a field where every mistake meant consequences. Yet here she was, being treated as though her very existence was a crime. The way their eyes cut over her skin, the way their tone dripped with suspicion, it was clear. They hadn't come here searching for justice. They had come here searching for someone who looked like her. The neighbors began to stir. Porch lights flicked on, curtains shifted. She felt the sting of humiliation mix with fear, knowing eyes were watching her dragged from her safe space into the cold night. No explanations, no evidence, just force. And yet something in their frantic searching seemed off. They weren't looking at her. They were tearing through her home like predators circling prey, every drawer yanked open, every picture frame tilted, every step echoing with a chilling message. You don't belong. You're not safe, not even in your own home. She tried to ask why they were there, her voice trembling, but was silenced by a glare sharp enough to cut. Minutes stretched like hours. The officers whispered among themselves, confusion flickering across their faces. This wasn't the easy raid they expected. Still, the guns didn't lower. The tension didn't ease. Angela stood frozen in the center of her own living room, her pulse pounding, her breath short, and then it happened. One of them stopped, his flashlight locked onto the far wall. He stepped closer, his hand falling still. The others noticed, their movement slowing until the room was silent again. Angela followed their gaze, her stomach twisting, realizing exactly what they had seen. It was the jacket, the dark blue fabric with bold yellow letters. A jacket she had worn proudly after completing her time in federal training. A gift from colleagues she considered family. The 3 letters stitched across its back carried weight far beyond her small home. But in that moment, Angela didn't feel protected by it. She felt exposed. Would this revelation stop the madness, or make it worse? The room went still, the chaos collapsing into an uneasy silence. Every flashlight beam seemed to converge on that one object, the FBI jacket hanging neatly on the wall. For a moment, no one moved. Angela could feel the air shift, their voices, once filled with command and certainty, now faltered into hesitation. But hesitation didn't erase what had already been done. Her door still lay shattered, her privacy stripped bare, her body trembling under the weight of guns that had been aimed at her without reason. The power imbalance was suffocating. She stood there in her own living room, caught between 2 realities. In their eyes, she was a suspect. But on that wall hung proof of her sacrifice, her service, her identity as more than the stereotype they had painted onto her skin. One officer stepped forward, lowering his weapon just slightly. His face betrayed something ugly, shame, maybe, but laced with defiance, as though acknowledging the jacket meant admitting the raid itself was unjust. Another officer muttered something under his breath, shaking his head, their unity cracking. Angela's pulse thundered. She realized the jacket had done what her words could not. It forced them to see her not as a faceless target, but as someone who belonged to the very system they claimed to protect. And yet, that realization only deepened the wound. Did her life matter only because of a jacket? Did she have to prove her worth through credentials to be seen as human? Her breathing quickened, her chest heavy. Neighbors gathered outside, their whispers swelling. The flashing police lights turned her home into a stage, her dignity on display. For the first time that night, the officers looked uncertain, even exposed. Angela's hands shook as she clenched them at her sides. The raid was over, but the damage was already done, because sometimes the deepest cuts are the ones left behind in silence. By dawn, the flashing lights were gone, but the scars remained. Angela stood in the wreckage of her home, splintered wood where her door once stood, overturned drawers spilling memories across the floor. The officers had left quietly, their silence a bitter acknowledgement of their mistake, but not an apology. Not a word of accountability, just absence. For Angela, the humiliation lingered heavier than the damage. Her neighbors had seen it all. They'd seen her dragged into the night, treated like a criminal in the very place she had built as her refuge. And though the jacket on her wall had stopped the raid from spiraling further, it couldn't erase what had already been stolen, her sense of safety, her dignity, her trust in a system she had once served. That night became a mirror reflecting a painful truth. If even she, an FBI-trained professional, a woman who had devoted her life to justice, could be treated as guilty before proven innocent, what did that mean for those without a badge, without a title, without proof stitched into their clothing that their life had value? Angela knew her story was not an isolated mistake. It was part of a pattern. An unbroken chain of doors kicked in, lives shattered, and people of color forced to prove their humanity in the face of suspicion. And so, the question echoes long after the sirens fade. How many more homes will be broken? How many more lives disrupted? Before society admits that the real threat is not the people being targeted, but the prejudice that drives the targeting itself. Because if a jacket is the only thing standing between life and death, what does that say about justice in America?